Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 101.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques, bringing you the custom club fitting experience of your life and lower scores always. One of the first people I met at the first AGCP roundtable I attended about 10 years ago was Chris Hilleary, president of Aerotech Golf, and he was a sponsor for AGCP at that meeting. He's been a long-standing supporter of true custom club fitting, and his shafts are in the fitting carts of all of the major custom club fitters that I know. And just about every week, a winner on one of the three major tours is playing with one of the Aerotech steel fiber graphite composite shafts. So it's a pleasure this week to do this interview with Chris and have him share some basic knowledge with you about graphite composite shafts and also about Aerotech steel fiber shafts. Enjoy. Hello, this is Tony Wright with the Golf Improvement Podcast, and today it's a pleasure to talk with Chris Hilleary, president of Aerotech Golf. Aerotech golf shafts have had more professional tour wins than any other graphite iron shaft in history, but you know, for us mortals, they are a tremendous option. Chris is a great friend to custom club fitters because of all the variety of options, in particular in the iron shafts that they provided in terms of weights and flexes and all those kind of things. They really help us to hone in on what's right for golfers. Gosh, Chris, I think I met you about 10 years ago at one of the very early AGCP meetings, and things have continued to go well for you folks. So thanks for being with me today.
Yeah, Tony, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, it's going to be fun and interesting, both for golfers and for custom club fitters. So I'll bet you've told this story more than once, but it's always interesting for people to hear a little bit about, kind of what your story is. How did you first get into the world of developing graphite composite and actually the steel fiber golf shafts?
Sure. Well, yes, I have told the story before, but it was a long time ago. I actually didn't start playing the game until I was 21 years old, and I fell in love with the game immediately. And I have a manufacturing engineering technology degree, and I was playing in a golf tournament and happened to get paired up with one of the founders of Aerotech Sports, and I was playing very well, and he asked me to come in and see him that next week, and I went to work for him, and this was back in January of 1997, and I ran their golf division for him for 9 years, and then just about 9 years, and then I purchased that golf division from them in 2005, in late 2005, and that's probably one of the smartest things I ever did.
Yeah. Well, it's been good for golfers, too, that you did that. So now I want to go back a little bit to basics for some of the listeners, and also because I'm interested to hear you discuss it. There are typically – now let me give you a little background, by the way, too. In my PhD Oak Ridge National Lab life, there are a lot of graphite composite guys doing things in aerospace industry and stuff. So I had a little bit of background in this or hearing from them. But there's two ways to make the final product that are part of what you do. Sort of a steel wrap graphite shafts and filament winding graphite shafts. Kind of go back to basics a little bit for people and talk about those two types, but also, why filament winding is really the way to go for quality golf shafts.
Sure. Like you say, there are two basic manufacturing techniques. One is sheet wrap or table rolling, and what you do is you take a steel mandrel and a sheet of graphite, and you roll that sheet of graphite onto the steel mandrel, and each one of those sheets will have different angle fiber plies, and you orient those plies and those fiber angles to achieve different flexible properties of the shaft, and then the shaft is cured and the mandrel's pulled out, and then it's finished. And one of the drawbacks with that technique is that sheet of graphite, when it's rolled onto the mandrel, has a seam. It has a start and it has a finish, and so that creates a seam that runs up and down the shaft. What we do is we do filament winding, which you take a steel mandrel and a toe of graphite, which is like a yarn, like a thread, like it's multiple filaments of graphite that run in one direction, and it comes off of a spool, and it's run through a resin bath, and then it's wound back and forth onto a spinning mandrel, and that achieves a seamless structure. And you achieve your different fiber angles by slowing the spinning of the mandrel down, or speeding it up, or moving the carriage that delivers the fiber onto the mandrel faster. Speeding it up and slowing it down, you can change the fiber angle on the mandrel, and that's how you achieve the different flexible properties. Obviously, we do the filament winding because we feel like a seamless structure is really beneficial as far as being uniform in its bending properties all the way around the circumference of the shaft, and so we don't have to deal with trying to minimize the effect of the seams on the shaft that you do on a sheet wrap, and so we've really devoted ourselves to that manufacturing technique.
And I think there's a little piece some people might miss. Real old school, 10, 20 years ago, everybody just talked about the sort of the butt flex of a golf shaft, but really what's important is the change in properties throughout the length of a shaft, and how that can affect how it performs for different people. And you really wouldn't be able to do that, I don't think, with a sheet wrap kind of things, where you probably have a lot more control over those kind of properties with the filament winding. Is that a good way of capturing
Well,
that?
I mean, there's pluses and minuses to both techniques.
Yeah.
Sheet wrap, actually, you have the ability to immediately change the angles by putting a ply up around the butt section, and then putting a different angle ply down below. Where filament winding, you have to gradually move into those different angles by slowing the spinning of the mandrel or speeding it up. So there's just two different ways of achieving the different flexible properties, but we really feel just the fact that it's a seamless structure that gives us a more consistent performing part.
Okay, well, that's interesting to hear a little bit more about. Now, you did say you have a background in manufacturing technology, and it's what sort of brought you into this. What kind of goes on in your mind, sort of from idea to final product, when you're creating, some new steel fiber golf shaft product, let's say a new iron shaft? Can you talk a little bit about some of the insides of that, from, I think I wanted to do this, to, okay, now here it is?
Sure. Generally, what happens is we see a performance need or attribute that we're trying to achieve. Let's say, for instance, we have a new steel fiber iron shaft coming out. It'll be available in mid-June to our dealer and distributor club fitter networks. And what we saw with our typical, our standard steel fiber product is a very, very stable and stout product. So it's really designed for, keeping, for stronger players, especially the heavier models, for tour type players, and allows it to play more like a steel product. But what we're finding is that a lot of our club fitters are needing to soft step these shafts a couple of times, or if somebody normally plays a stiff, you put them into a regular, and so what we see is a need for a shaft to be a little bit easier to play as you get into the mid irons and long irons. And so we then take a look at what we need to do to the flexural properties of the shaft, the weights, the torques, that sort of thing, to achieve something that's a little bit easier to play for the majority of golfers. And what we ended up doing was taking, the pitching wedge tip stiffness. The butt stiffnesses are going to be very similar to our current product. But the tip stiffnesses are a way that you can really change ball flight with a shaft.
Yeah.
And what we've done is we've used the pitching wedge as our baseline, and we've matched the tip stiffness of the pitching wedge of our current product. And then the shaft tip gets softer quicker as you move into this mid irons and long irons, and which then creates a shaft of more of a flighted set. Your short irons are still very stable in the tip section, and then as you get into your mid and long irons, they get a little bit easier to get the ball in the air and hit the ball a little bit higher. So it really comes down to seeing a performance attribute that you're trying to achieve, and that will expand your player profile, the type of player that it's going to fit into, to fit more people. And so that's really what drives our new designs.
And then I guess getting a variety of players to test it and hit it, like this new one you're talking about, to sort of confirm that it's doing the kind of things that you want, or maybe going back and then changing something. And there's probably some back and forth and give and take in that end part, right? It's probably not as simple as we're making a new shaft.
No. It takes a while. I mean, this product's been in the design phase for about a year now, or a little over a year. And you're right. I mean, what we do is we spec out stiffness profiles and torques and dimensional, all the dimensional properties of the shaft, and then give that to the factory, and that factory sends samples. We then run our mechanical and static tests on it, and then we build them when we hit them. Sometimes we don't build them and hit them. We have to make tweaks before we even do that, but there is a number of back and forth until we finally get the product exactly the way we want it.
Like good engineering design, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, if you would, this is sort of a little bit back to basics kind of a question, but talk about some of the main differences, from the standpoint of what you're doing when you're manufacturing things, contrasting taper tip and parallel tip iron shafts, and then iron shafts and wood shafts. What are when you're
Sure.
doing those?
Sure.
What are sort of the differences between those two categories from your standpoint of building things and making things?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, taper tip irons, it's my guess that the reason that those became popular was really from an assembly standpoint, because they are self-centering when they're put into a taper tip hosel. So your lofts and lies come out closer to tolerance because the taper tip will self-center itself. The drawback with the taper tip shaft is that you've got to design, there's a different mandrel or a different design for each individual shaft, as opposed to a parallel tip shaft, which comes in a blank, and then you tip it to achieve the different tip stiffnesses for each iron. And there's pluses and minuses to both of them. And the parallel tips obviously are a little easier to design. And they're easier as far as inventory, maintaining inventories, at our customers and here at our facility. Taper tips do, because each shaft has its own design, we're able to manipulate the stiffness profile to a greater degree between iron shafts. So, so we can change tip stiffness greater between a pitching wedge and a 9-iron shaft than we can with a parallel tip with just a half-inch tip trim. So there's plus and minuses to both. The taper tips also allow us to do what's known as constant weight. Because each shaft has its own design, we can design each shaft at the same weight. So where a parallel tip shaft, when you tip it and you butt trim it to length, it gets lighter as it gets shorter. So that is something that, depending on the player's feel, they will kind of gravitate to one or the other of those. As far as the difference between iron shafts and driver shafts, really very similar as far as manufacturing technique goes. It's just that driver shafts obviously we use higher modulus materials because we're trying to hit stiffnesses at lighter weights than we are with iron shafts. And so there is some different design criteria as far as materials and taper lengths and parallel lengths and that sort of thing. So, but as far as the manufacturing standpoint goes, they're made the same.
Okay, obviously different lengths, and as you say, the wall thicknesses of the iron shafts are vastly different, for example, than the wall thicknesses of the wood shafts. Isn't that right? So that's
correct.
I hadn't thought about the higher modulus materials, but obviously when you think of that,
because you have more materials in a heavier walled iron shaft, you don't want to use a super stiff material because then the shaft will become boardy and too stiff. So, but the driver shafts are so thin walled, like you said, that you have to use a higher modulus, a more expensive material, generally speaking, to hit the stiffnesses that you need.
Okay, yeah, that's a good explanation of all that. Now, the differentiator of what you do is, in the name of your shafts, which is steel fiber, and I'm not sure the vast majority of people who are listening understand that. I know some of my club fitting friends do, but talk about what sort of got you down that road of going to steel fiber composite shafts, I would call them, I guess, right?
Sure. Well, I saw a void in the industry, a long time ago when I got into the industry that, graphite iron shafts were really only being used by slower swing speed players. And the stronger swing speed players were not, they weren't controllable enough. They were too light. They were too whippy. They had, stiffness profiles were much too soft. And then some manufacturers had experimented with heavier weighted iron shafts. And the problem with that is that when you create a heavier weighted graphite iron shaft, you have to put a lot of graphite in it. And like I said, like we were talking about, the wall thickness gets real thick and the shaft can get a boardy feel because the graphite's so stiff. And what I knew that we needed to create a heavier weighted shaft so it would be embraced by the stronger player. And so I knew right away I needed to add a higher density material to the shaft to thin out the wall. And we tried all kinds of things like tungsten powder in the resin system. We tried to wind a copper wire in with the graphite, and then I discovered the steel fiber material that's made from out of Belgium, and it's made with a super thin material. I'm sorry, it probably sounds like someone's trying to beep in on me here.
You're okay. I understand.
So this steel fiber material is actually, we use it in 8 micron diameter, which is 1/10 the diameter of human hair, and we put 3,000 of those individual hairs or filaments of steel into a toe, just like we apply the graphite into a yarn-like material, and that's then applied to the surface. And that steel is 5 times heavier than graphite. So by putting a thin layer of steel on the surface of the shaft, we are then able to manipulate the wall thickness. We're able to bring the weight up with 1/5 the amount of added material. So it maintained the playability of the shaft as it got into these heavier weights and gave it a much better feel. It allowed us to not overly stiffen the shaft, and it's really been a game changer as far as getting these. Changing the mindset of the industry to that graphite iron shafts are actually they're actually a true option for even the best players in the world.
Yeah, and definitely, as we said at the start. Well, I'm curious a little bit. You said it came from Belgium. I mean, was it sort of a serendipitous thing to have found that, or did you just do a lot of researching into there wasn't Google 15 years ago or whenever you did this, right?
Yeah. Well, no, there was. There was.
Okay.
But yes, it was just a ton of research. And like I said, I mean, we tried to do things with tungsten powder. We tried to do things with, different metal materials co-wound in with the graphite. And, but we knew that if I could create a full layer on the surface, that this would really ultimately, and when we found the steel fiber material, we had to change their manufacturing process so it was usable for us in our manufacturing process.
Oh, okay.
And then we tried to put it in different orientations on the shaft, and finally we put it in this hoop orientation, which means it wraps around the shaft, and you can actually see the fiber. We just have a clear coat over the surface of it, and it's been a real game changer for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, so let's talk about sort of the start of the game changer world, and then kind of some of your most fun maybe successes recently, because I mean it's being played on every tour. One of the stories that at least a number of people know is when Matt Kuchar started to play the shaft, and maybe talk about that. But maybe a more recent story is somebody starting to play Aerotex that's been kind of satisfying to you.
Sure. Well, Matt was our first player, and he's been, a huge part of our success, just because he's been with us for 10 years. His dad first got fit for our shafts down at Cool Clubs in Arizona, and he got home back to Florida, and he called me and said, "Hey, I got fit. He hit your shafts. I love them." But when they sent me the set, they weren't made with the same shafts. And he said, is it possible to get you to send me a set? And I said, well, absolutely. But the next time you play with Matt, make sure that you let him hit him. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, I got a call from Matt directly, and he said, "Hey, I hit my dad's clubs, and I absolutely love them. It's what I've been looking for. I've been looking for something a little bit lighter and something that I could hit a little bit higher and pick up some yardage." And so I sent him a set out to the Shriner event in Vegas, is what it was called back then, and it was in 2008. And he put them in play, and he shot 63 his first two rounds, and he's been a huge fan and been a huge proponent for us ever since. But you're right, we continue to get play on all tours. I mean, the last 2 weeks on the LPGA tour. Last week, not this last week, but the week before, we had the winner, and we had 5 of the top 7 finishers on the LPGA. And then this week, we had 4 of the top 7. We had 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 6th or something like that. So, the LPGA has just been incredible for us. We've got a huge number of players out there, and the Champions Tour equally as well. I mean, we have some of the world's best players. We have Fred Couples and Mark O'Meara and Tom Watson and Colin Montgomery put us in play last year, and he sent me an email and just said, this is the best iron shaft I've ever hit. And he said, as you know, I've hit a lot of iron shafts.
Yeah, right.
And so he's won with us a few times, and he's been a great proponent as well.
Now, I think that guy that's a little older than me too. I mean, I've seen pictures. Is Nicholas still playing them in his irons? I knew he wasn't.
He doesn't play much, but he certainly has in the past. I haven't seen him hit a golf club for a while, so you never really know. And he's not on tour, so we don't. Our tour reps don't see him.
Yeah. But I mean, I have seen some pictures, so he's sort of swinging it like some of us mortal guys swing it right now. So
yeah. And Arnold Palmer as well. I mean, he played them as well.
Yeah,
late great.
Yeah. Well, from the standpoint of sort of more recent history, what are some of the most the more near term, most recent products that you've developed that you think are of interest? As much, if not more, to the general golfer. The sort of 5 to 15 handicap player and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we, like I mentioned before, we do have this new iron shaft, this new flighted, we'll call it, iron shaft that will be available in June. We did just launch in Orlando in January our new super premium driver shaft, and it's the tie fiber. And what we've done is it's a similar construction to the steel fiber, but it has a full layer of titanium fiber on the surface as opposed to the steel fiber. One of the drawbacks with the steel fiber technology is that we can only get so light with it because it has a full layer of steel on the surface. Well, the titanium being lighter and being stiffer has allowed us to create this super premium driver shaft at a lighter weight. So we're able to apply this full layer of titanium fiber, giving it that stability on the surface with less weight added to the shaft. And it's created this incredibly stable graphite titanium combination driver shaft, something that's never been done before. And we're getting great feedback from out on tour. We're getting great feedback from our dealers and club fitters that are fitting with it. And so we're really excited about this new product. The titanium is substantially more expensive to produce than the steel fiber.
Yeah.
So, and I always told myself that I wasn't going to enter into that super premium driver shaft unless we had something that was truly different, and we really have it here with this product.
Yeah, that's neat to share about that. Well, this has been a great overview today. Both from the standpoint of the general elements of graphite shafts, and about what you in particular do. Any final words for golfers today out there that you want to pass on to them in terms of what kind of things they might do to play better?
Sure. Well, as we all know, steel still is the dominant material that is used in iron shafts still to this day. Everybody's made the move to graphite in their driver shafts. Nobody plays steel anymore. And I'm a firm believer that the will take over the category of the iron shafts as well. There's just too many benefits. There is obviously the design parameters that we have with graphite are much larger than you have with steel. We can design something heavier and softer, or lighter and stiffer, and we can manipulate stiffness profiles. But I think, one of the biggest things that graphite offers over steel is that it has the vibration dampening characteristics that reduce injury or aggravation of existing injuries or fatigue. And this is going to allow players to play longer, practice more without these aches and pains. So I would encourage anybody that's always thought graphite was for seniors and slower swing speed players to really give it a shot, because it's much different now than it ever has been in the past. And this new product, this new steel fiber shaft is kind of leading the charge there.
I'm personally, in my fitting, I'm trying very hard to get anybody who's over the age of 50 or so to really, really seriously consider graphite. And pretty much the only graphite that I carry are the steel fibers. But that I've got a couple friends that have had some issues with elbow things and stuff from steel, and it's an important deal if you want to kind of keep your longevity of playing, but performance too. So you get the best of both worlds. Right. So yeah.
Right.
Well, Chris, this has been a delight to get to do this today. I think maybe I cut you off a second. Was there anything else you were going to add?
No, I think we covered it, Tony. I do appreciate you having me on. And, if anybody has any questions about our product, they can feel free to just call us direct, or all of our contact information is on our website. Yep,
and you got a list of club fitters like me on your website too, and I'll put some links in the show notes about Aerotech, and maybe another article or two. There was something recently with Cool Clubs or something. Didn't they do something with you? A little article that was kind of neat. So
yeah.
You're not a secret anymore, are you?
Well, we're still a small company, but we are really enjoying, just changing the mindset of the golfing community, and like I said, I think graphite iron shafts are here to stay.
Well, Chris, thanks again, and like I said, I will put some links in the show notes, and just hang in a minute afterwards, and I appreciate it. Take care.
You bet. Thanks, Tony.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Thanks, Chris, for sharing lots of valuable information with golfers and true custom club fitters today. You can learn more about Aerotech steel fiber shafts by clicking the link in the show notes and by talking to a true custom club fitter near you. Well, that's it for today. I'm looking forward to talking custom club fitting with Tony Curo from True Fit Custom Clubs in Schenectady, New York. Tony was recently honored as the 2018 International Clubmakers Guild North American Clubmaker of the Year. I know you'll enjoy this interview with him. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com